When I heard that Season 4 of Castlevania was going to be the final season, I was really bummed out. Didn't make sense to me. Here you've got this great show that everybody loves, a video game adaptation no less. Just think for a minute about how rare that is. Wouldn't you want to keep this going for a while? But now, having just finished Season 4, I get it. There is something to be said for telling a story from start to finish and then walking away. And sometimes shows that try to keep going and going longer than they should, for fear of the producers being out of a job, I guess, while the quality dips and dips over time, don't get remembered as fondly as they would have otherwise, because part of what makes a story good is that it eventually ends. So here we have a show where the creators seemed to have a set endpoint, knew where the goalpost was, told the story he wanted to tell, and then decided, okay, we're done now. I have to respect that, even if I am really gonna miss this show. They did give us a great season to go out on, though. Season 4 is the payoff, not just for Season 3, but for the whole series, really. So a lot of things are addressed here, a lot of long-running plots get wrapped up, and they even addressed some issues that people had with the last season along the way. I know there were some people who got a little impatient with Season 3 because it was slow-paced and seemed kind of uneventful until the last 2 or 3 episodes, and when I reviewed Season 3, I even said it felt like a lot of setup for stuff that would happen later. And it was. And looking back on it now, I think people might appreciate Season 3 more because without that setup, Season 4 wouldn't have come off as well as it does. In fact, it almost feels like Season 4 is overcompensating a little bit. In my opinion, this was the fastest paced season the show has done. The long conversations and navel-gazing are striking a really nice balance with the action now. The 10 episodes go by just like that, facilitated by the fact that there's really not that much story left. The setup's done. All there is now is to do the final battles, kill the bad guys, and go home. So this season has way more action than Season 3. Hell, it probably has more action than the first 3 seasons combined. And what I love about it is that Warren Ellis seems to have taken some of the previous criticism into account when he was writing this thing. All the characters are a lot more proactive than they used to be. That's a big theme of the season, actually. Everyone is saying we need to stop reacting and start acting. They're not just waiting for things to happen to them anymore. They're all taking matters into their own hands, which really helps push the plot forward definitely faster than it was before. There's a real narrative thrust there that helps the story and the characters. I was more invested in just about everybody now. Like Carmela, for example. Hate Carmela all you want, but that bitch wants to get shit done. And it's hard to root against a character like that, even when she's the bad guy. And that's another theme of the season. There are characters doing bad things, but they're just so driven and determined, and in some cases have motivations you can sympathize with, and it just makes you more invested in everybody and what they're doing. And nowhere is that more beneficial than with the Hector plot. That was my one real gripe with Season 3, that Hector was still making dumb decisions and getting played by other people when he really shouldn't have been. That's done now. We see real quickly that Hector's learned his lesson, he's wised up, and now he's actively taking steps to rectify his situation. Last time I was kind of frustrated wanting to see Hector get his act together, but here I was finally rooting for the guy. He's finally thinking strategically and being smart about things. And that does wonders for his character. Better late than never, buddy. You're a slow learner, but you got there in the end. That's what counts. However, the way that whole plot wraps up with Hector and Carmela and Isaac and all those people, it creates a weird situation, because this has been one of the more obvious through lines of the show. Carmela turns against Dracula, she wants to be the new alpha of the vampire world, her plans are getting bigger and bigger. That's been building up since early on. So you'd think this would all tie back to Trevor and Sypha and Alucard somehow, and then Carmela would be the final boss, right? And the way that plot pays off is very satisfying, but Carmela ends up being more of a mini-boss, and then the main event involves other stuff with not nearly as much build-up to it. Now, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It all ties back to the Infinite Corridor and people still wanting to bring Dracula back for various reasons, but this is where some of Warren Ellis's stranger ideas come into play. And not that there wasn't foreshadowing for it, there was, but when they start getting into the rebus and alchemy and all those kinds of things, I started feeling like this was a really crooked, winding way to get from point A to point B. These must have been concepts from the games, which again, I'm not that familiar with, so I don't know for sure. If they're not, if this all came from Warren Ellis's brain, then he must have been smoking something funky when he wrote this. And that kind of goes for the climax too, which is pretty great, let me say that. But the final boss turns out to be kind of a last-minute surprise, whereas Carmilla, the one with all the buildup, is dealt with separately. And in hindsight, that was probably the right decision, because there was no way Carmilla, or anyone really, was going to top what the real final boss is and does, but it was just a really unusual way to execute all this. And this is my one real gripe about Season 4, that the ultimate climax relies heavily on you being caught off guard by this last-minute swerve when the ideas and the lore involved with this thing hadn't been explored all that much. I dug the hell out of the fight, but it did feel like an odd detour from where I thought the story was going. Having said that, if your plan is to end the whole thing, you'd better go big. And they definitely go big here. They have the biggest fight sequences they've ever done, some of the most emotionally charged moments too, and when it was over, I said to myself, yeah, maybe this is the time to end the show, because I don't know how the hell you top that. I don't know where you go after this, unless you're starting a new story with new characters. So maybe it's just time to move on and see what shenanigans Simon gets up to or something. So yeah, even though the final battle is kind of narratively wonky with one or two things I had questions about, it's still hard to imagine a more fitting conclusion to this thing. Action-wise, they saved the biggest and best stuff for last. They faced the biggest threat the show was likely ever going to come up with. All the characters get wrapped up, some get more attention than others, and there was one in particular that I felt really bad for, but I couldn't think of any major threads that were left dangling. So maybe 4 was just the magic number for Castlevania. And honestly, I'd rather they leave it here than run the risk of doing more seasons that feel anticlimactic after this one. If they want to continue exploring this world with a new cast of characters or at a different point in the timeline, that's cool. But if this is the last we see of Trevor and co., I think we left them in a good place. There's just one thing I still can't figure out. Why was Lisa Tepish in hell? Yeah, her choice of spouses is questionable, and banging the Lord of all Vampires is probably frowned upon by the man upstairs. But still, Lisa was a good person. Her being in hell doesn't add up. I don't see any reason why she shouldn't have gone to the good place instead. Unless there is no good place. Unless everybody goes to hell. In which case, every notion we've ever had as a people, as a society, as a species about being a good person or leaving the world better than when we found it, it's all meaningless. Because there's no actual judgment for any of us, because at the end of the day, everybody, good people, bad people, saints, sinners, angels, demons, we all go to the same place. So regardless of what we do in this life, none of it really matters. When it's all said and done, every single one of us ends up in the same hellish, unforgiving, godforsaken pit always thought to be reserved for the darkest, ugliest, most miserable creatures to ever crawl out of the... Sorry, I kind of went off on a weird tangent there. All that stuff's a topic for another time. But right now is the time for you to leave a comment down below, ding that bell icon for notifications, and follow me on social media so you'll always know when I upload new stuff. The link is down there. There's also a link to my new live streaming channel, where all live streams will be uploaded from now on. The algorithm's been raking me over the coals lately, so I gotta stay one step ahead of this thing. Thumbs up the video, share, subscribe, make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more very soon. You guys take care, do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time.